when I really think about payroll, I genuinely believe it's the lifeblood of the world. People, they get paid and then they get to live their life, right? Everybody shows up for work each day. They work on whatever they do. They have maybe a passion for what they do, hopefully, and then they get paid. And then that opens up just a world of possibility. Are they going to turn that into food? Are they going to turn it into rent? Bitcoin, whatever they choose to spend their money on, none of that's possible without being paid.
Welcome to the Payroll Podcast with your host, Nick Day. Find out what it takes to truly discover what it takes to elevate your career within payroll as we meet with the industry leaders who are shaping the industry for tomorrow.
Hello and welcome back to the Payroll Podcast. My name is Nick Day, CEO at JJ Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. And today I'm super excited to welcome Jim Kohl to the Payroll Podcast show. Now, Jim is head of payroll operations at Check, and he has a mantra, which is to improve payroll one life, one check at a time. We're going to find out more about that a little bit later on during the show. Now, as an experienced leader with a focus on growth, tapping into potential and motivating payroll teams, Jim is a certified payroll professional with a real history of working in the software as a service industry, or SaaS as it's better known. Now, Jim is extremely knowledgeable about payroll, which you're going to discover during the course of this episode. He's extremely knowledgeable on current industry trends, and more importantly, he's really clued up when it comes to talking about innovation and disruptive technologies that are entering the global payroll space. Jim also has a great Twitter account, which I will put a link to in the show notes. If you want to follow him, I recommend you do. I do. He's always talking about the world of payroll with a great comedy edge to it as well. So do keep an eye on that. Having been at Edge now for nearly 3 years, I've invited him to the Payroll Podcast show today to talk about how infrastructure and data innovation is really rapidly changing the profile of payroll. So we're going to get into that disruptive tech in a little bit more detail today. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Jim. How are you feeling today?
Good, Nick. Thanks for all those kind words. I truly appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm delighted to have you on the show. I'm going to start with the first question I ask all my guests on the Payroll Podcast, which is this: what does the word payroll mean to you?
This is a great question, and so many of your guests prior have had just wonderful answers. So I feel that I have a lot to live up to here. But when I really think about payroll, I genuinely believe it's the lifeblood of the world. People, they get paid and then they get to live their life, right? Everybody shows up for work each day. They work on whatever they do. They have maybe a passion for what they do, hopefully. And then they get paid. And then that opens up just a world of possibility. Are they going to turn that into food? Are they going to turn it into rent, Bitcoin, whatever they choose to spend their money on? None of that's possible without being paid. The good folks that run the payroll for them. If I really think about it, look under the hood, payroll to me is the lifeblood of the world.
Love that. What a great response. That's a big picture answer. And you're absolutely right. It's a great way of looking at the world. And I think, as I said with your Twitter account earlier, that comes through for those that follow the work that you do and your passion for payroll, which is second to none. So let's jump into the subject area for today. How do you see data innovation really making payroll administrators and employees? How's it changing the world of payroll, should we say, if you're from the payroll administration point of view, and how is it making employees' lives easier?
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost harder to answer how isn't it making administrators' lives easier. But if we look at a few things that really stand out to me, obviously it's cloud computing, the development of continuous real-time payroll calculations, just make being a payroll admin's life so much easier.
Yeah.
If you'll indulge me for a moment, I'm going to go back in my history a bit.
Go for it.
When I first started running payroll, I was on a DOS-based system, which I'm sure some of your listeners remember those. And a client would call up, they would read off the hours to me, type them into the system, and then that was it. It was sent off into the ether, Nick, and they had to pray that I was accurate. I prayed I was accurate. And then the next day that the checks would arrive for them. And that's when we were able to determine if that accuracy was there. Now we're in this world where you can be a payroll administrator You can run a regular payroll, you can run a bonus payroll, you can run a severance payroll, you can check the numbers, you can add 401k, remove 401k. You can literally give your employees their net amounts with different scenarios depending on what they're looking for.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go above and beyond, and that ability was just never there before.
Yeah.
So that one definitely stands out to me. And I know most folks probably agree with those two. And then one that I've started to see on the side that has really made payroll administrators' lives easier is I think we're entering into a world where it's never been easier to convert between payroll providers. I think a few years ago, the word implementation could have been compared with a four-letter word. Now we're seeing it's so much easier to migrate that data, all of that year-to-date data, all of the demographic data of those employees. We're on the doorstep of self-serve, where if you're not happy with your payroll provider, you can go to another payroll provider and basically get yourself running, within a
Yeah.
matter of hours, depending. And I think we're just seeing a lot of innovation in that area. You have companies like Finch and Merge that are out there helping to extract that data, format it, and then really just move along the implementation process quicker than ever. You're removing the human element, which obviously, increases the accuracy. And I think that, I know we're talking largely about administrators, but I think you're also just seeing the benefit to payroll companies because of that. Right. I think there's a loss of engagement from that sales session to that first conversion session. But if you take that kind of conversion session out, people can do that work themselves. And I think that is one of the ways that we're really seeing the face of payroll change.
Yeah, I think it's a great response. And I should mention here that your background has predominantly nearly always been in software, or albeit within the payroll industry, but within software providers, right? So you've seen this change in a viewpoint that others won't necessarily have access to. It's really interesting, as you mentioned there, the DOS-based systems, you'd measure your success by almost the number of complaints that came back. Like, if no complaints, that means it's done well. We've certainly moved on a really long way since then. And actually, we're now seeing, certainly in the UK anyway, we're seeing employees considered almost a consumer now. So they need more access to, as you mentioned, all the different ways you can pay someone, and the way that they receive their pay is critical because, whether it's interactive dashboarding, whether it's understanding pay, using automated techniques to tell you where your tax has gone and why it's been deducted in this way, all these things improve the employee experience, which has an absolute impact on well-being, happiness, knowing you're being paid correctly and on time, so you can pay the bills and do the things you need to do. But also it helps with things, which are wider than that and broader than that, such as retention of employees, well-being of employees, mental health, attraction for new employees coming into your brand. And I think payroll now, as you say, has a huge influence on so many facets of a business, and then the success of that business now. But I think it's a really exciting time to be involved in the cutting edge of tech, which of course you are, and you're in that space. And it's really exciting to hear it from your point of view. If I was to ask you them, you talked about some of the things that you've seen shift in relation to how it's made payroll administrators' lives easier, but what are the key infrastructural or data innovation changes that you've particularly seen come to the fore over the last 3 years, maybe just before the pandemic hit? We know the pandemic has accelerated a lot of the things people were trying to achieve. Maybe we'll go slightly just before the pandemic. So what are things you were starting to see come into play then that we're really now seeing adopted currently?
Yeah, it's funny. I do agree that, the pandemic obviously sped everything up, but right before that, we were definitely seeing employees demanding faster wage access. So I think that's the top of it. You mentioned employees are definitely the consumer, and I think there definitely has been a shift there. And I think getting them paid quicker and giving them better access to understanding their pay has been a huge shift in general.
Yeah.
I really appreciate. I love having folks educated and understanding their pay. I think, unfortunately, most people look at their bank account on payday versus their pay stub or
I'd agree.
pay slip. Yeah, but I wish they would. I wish they would understand and see that. We'd certainly prevent a lot of problems that way. But I think also prior to the pandemic, and one of the reasons that I do think check exists, obviously, is just the growth of vertical SaaS. You've just seen so many companies be able to get a stronger hold on industry specific technology and enabling, mobile workforces for so many different companies, and time tracking and job costing and all these, nuanced and niche companies have been able to grow in the past 10 years and really empower businesses to be more efficient and give their owners time back to work on what they're passionate about, and less time spent doing those administrative tasks. So those two stand out to me. The third one, I don't know if we were seeing this prior to the pandemic, or maybe it has been kind of sped up because of it. But I genuinely believe that onboarding and offboarding in general has just become so much more seamless in so many different ways. I think employees join companies now and they get a link. There's their W-4, there's their I-9, which are both forms in the United States you need to set up in order to work. That's where you're choosing, what withholding you're looking for. Your state forms included. You're adding your bank account. Typically, you're linking it, through any of the banking platforms out there. I think Plaid's the biggest, but you're getting your bank linked. All of your withholding set up. And then any other demographic information that's needed, and it's all happening within this link instead of
multiple forms
multiple forms and days and questions, and I don't know what I'm doing, but it's all digital, and it's just one link, and it's just an incredible process.
I think based on the Great Resignation or the Great Awakening, as I prefer to call it, right, where people are really shifting, it's probably good that we've got those processes in play now. It really would have been a nightmare for a lot of the departments if we were still in that paper-based world, if you like, because the amount of people and starters and leavers we're seeing globally change now. That would have been a hell of an additional workload put on payroll departments for sure.
Without a doubt.
So if we talk about then some of the, I guess, things that people are embedding at the minute, you talk a lot about factors in some of the work that you've done and things that I've read that are really combining to make embedded payroll possible now. I wonder if you could just explain what you mean by embedded payroll, and when people ask you about it, what do you advise people do in terms of the way that they think about embedded payroll?
Embedded payroll really a space that Check pioneered. If you really break down the offering that Check puts out there, we allow SaaS companies to add payroll to their ecosystem, to their product, right? So if you had a timesheet company, Nick's timesheets, everybody loved your timesheets. There's a good chance they're taking your timesheets and importing them into QuickBooks or Paychex or one of those companies. And there's a good chance that they probably tell you they love your product, but they hate importing it into their payroll provider. You hear that enough and you say, why can't we offer payroll? And that's what embedded payroll is there for. And what embedded payroll allows is all of the tax calculations, which in the United States are multiple across, the 50 states and DC, plenty of locals. And it just gets more complex when you add in benefits and you add in deductions. But embedded payroll does those tax calculations for those companies, right? So huge benefit right there, right? Doing the hard part. Separately, moving payments, critical piece of it, right? Payroll is nothing if you're not actually getting that money.
Yeah.
Check will move that money for the company that's embedding payroll in their system. And then finally, every quarter and every year, what do? We file taxes, right? So all of those returns are being filed on behalf of every end user of one of our partners. So it's the calculations, it's the payment, and then it's those filings are the true value of what embedded payroll offers.
Check at the minute are offering these services in the US, but actually this is really relevant globally, because actually what Check have identified, and I think we've seen actually some of this. We have had some UK companies similar. One was recently sold. I can't remember the name now, but I could find it in my notes. But where people are really offering different types of API integration, right? So the future payroll systems are offering different kind of API-based components that give you, if you're running a payroll department, more opportunities to offer the kind of level of service you need based on your unique payroll department. And we all know that every payroll department, whether you're based in the US, the UK, or anywhere else, is unique to your business, right? In terms of the volumes you pay, the frequencies, the complexities. So I'd love to know if you could if we broaden this concept out so that our global audience get to grips with this, because this is going to impact payroll departments globally if it isn't already. the future of payroll in relation to how API integration can really help improve opportunities for payroll professionals?
I think number one, you're going to see just a ton more opportunity in terms of positions, jobs, people looking for payroll employees with a software background, payroll employees who have a strong compliance background. Nick, I think you laid out, what is a career path for a payroll employee, and I think you
Yeah.
said there was 60 different
Over 60, and you
paths.
just mentioned some of them there. Actually, payroll software development being a great example, and payroll compliance for sure.
Yeah, so I don't think that those are going to go away, and I think that they're going to be more exciting opportunities because you're going to have more companies building from the ground up or adding this into their product and trying to customize it and really give their audience, their market, their vision of what payroll can be that really meets their needs. If we go back a few years, the big payroll providers were out there and they had the most generic payroll system possible to reach the broadest market possible. That's great, right? You can certainly get it done that way. It left a lot of, I think, users unsatisfied or forced into these workaround processes to use the system to achieve the outcome they wanted. Embedding payroll is going to give either companies that add it the opportunity to really make it unique to their market and to what their audience demands. Or if you are a company who wants to do your own payroll, right? So instead of outsourcing, you just want to do your own payroll, you can also embed payroll within your ecosystem.
Yeah.
We call that check direct. And there's ton of benefits if you're a staffing company, as an example, and you're like, we don't want to keep using ADP to run our payroll. We want to run our own payroll, right? We should have that luxury and we should have that freedom, and we want to capture our own data, and we don't have to always want to reach out to get a report. If you embed payroll within your own product, you're going to have a ton of opportunity to run it, customize it, increase the employee experience. But to go back to the beginning of this question, you're going to have people within your own company that have the ability to run your payroll software, create your payroll software, understand what needs to be added, what are you looking for to be competitive, and what opportunities are there. So I hope that answers the question, but those are some of the opportunities I see.
It does. It's like tick, 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 tick for me. I mean, for those not familiar, and I will put a link in the show notes to the Check website. But one of the great things about Check is that it's a business that allows users to effectively launch and create their own payroll products, as you mentioned there, whether that's as an individual trying to create their own product to sell to others or to deliver to others, or for your own business and your own employees. It's because you offer a number of different sort of white labeled payroll components, which I think you call them on your website, that people can kind of pick and choose from to allow them to build the front end experience for employees. So it's exactly catered towards what would work for the employees within that company. It's kind of a bespoke payroll system in that sense, while obviously Check then run the back end. So I'd love to know if you can just explain a little bit more about how that process works, particularly as well, because it's a SaaS proposition that I think is still relatively unique and innovative in the world of payroll right now. Certainly in the UK, I can see huge opportunities for this kind of process moving forward.
We are currently US based, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, they're keeping us busy enough as it is, but I think there definitely would be a ton of opportunity for expansion. Right now, the way the process works is, you identify it. If we go back to the Nick's timesheet example, you identify that there is a market for payroll, right? So you would create a partnership with Check, and then Check is the entire back end of that payroll system, doing, again, the calculations, the money movement, and the tax filings. You then get to customize that front end, right, to make it look like Nick's payroll. You can create a world where people don't even know that Check exists, right? People can just think that you offer payroll natively.
That's the white labeling aspect, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Which is exciting, and I think that people respond to that, especially if they trust you, right? Like they trust your timesheets. Now payroll's made available. Of course, we're going to trust Nick. He's got the best timesheets. Why wouldn't we want to use him for payroll? So that's sort of just the elevator pitch on how the process works. But I mean, if we double click and go a little bit deeper, I mean, it really is a partnership. We call everyone who works with Check our partner because they're really building on top of us. And if you're a timesheet company, you're passionate about timesheets. When you add in payroll, that's a big shift to your product, right?
Yeah.
Payroll is incredibly important.
Yeah.
I called it the lifeblood of the world, so you can see how reverent I am for payroll. When you add payroll, that's a big undertaking, right? And Check is there to work and enable you to actually grow and to become a successful payroll business, right? We have an incredible compliance staff. I've built a wonderful operations team, and we're there to really help every one of our partners build the teams they need to be successful to continue to run forever.
Yeah, it's a really smart proposition.
Have you ever asked yourself, how can I recruit payroll staff effectively? Please don't give up on your recruitment project just yet. Here at JGA Payroll Recruitment, we appreciate the difficulties associated with attracting, recruiting, and retaining top payroll talent. We also understand just how costly a poor payroll hire can be. JGA Recruitment are a niche payroll recruitment agency who will partner with you to resource payroll candidates who will improve both the accuracy and efficiency of your payroll department. Contact us today on 01727 800 377 or visit jgarecruitment.com to find out more.
From your perspective, how do you think payroll innovations that you're seeing come to the market now, how do you think they are catering to perhaps some of the markets that were previously unaddressed? I'm thinking at the minute, maybe one example, not to give the examples away because you'll have many more than I will, but obviously the pandemic has shifted the way that payroll professionals are working. So you can work from home and deliver, and we can pay payroll now and recruit staff across borders much easier than ever before. So we're seeing innovations kind of support that kind of new marketplace. But what are some of the things that you're seeing that perhaps were previously unaddressed that excite you, I guess?
Yeah, I'm super excited by how quickly folks can get paid. The faster money moves, I just think that's incredible. I'm at a point where when I started my career, I was paid semi-monthly, and I look back and I'm like, why did it take so long for me to be paid? And if you dig into it, it's well, the payroll staff had to make sure that they had time to move the money and approve the payroll, but we're making payroll easier. We're moving money quicker. People should be paid more consistently. I don't like the idea of people having to take payday loans. Certainly in emergencies, I think that's great. But getting people paid quicker, more accurately, like that genuinely excites me, largely because I saw so much pain because of it. Right. Anytime somebody wasn't paid and then it was, another 4 days to get them paid, to move that money and confirm that ACH. But now we're changing that, right? Somebody can call me up on Friday morning and say, "Oh my goodness, Nick wasn't paid. We forgot to add his hours." You can be paid before the end of the day, and like as a true payroll professional, like I absolutely love that. So that excites me. But I'm also really excited about a unified experience. I've worked in too many systems where you see doubling of information, confusion on the employee's part, confusion on the staff's part. They have a benefit system, they have a payroll system, they have their HR system. They may have specific benefits, right? You have your login to health, you have your login to your retirement or your 401k, and we're starting to see sort of this like cleaner, like one landscape, and I think that's also incredible. I genuinely like that. But to just take the question one step further, one thing that excites me specifically about embedded payroll and how it's making the world better is I can remember when it was the end of the month and I would have sales folks run up to my desk in a panic and they're like, "Can we support churches? I got a church payroll. I can close this deal today if we can support churches." And it's like, we can, there's a workaround, but it's painful, and you have that same conversation around restaurants and trucking companies and nonprofits and unions and schools and all of these specific industries that always had a workaround in the payroll system. And you could see the salesperson was cringing. They're like, "I know I can close this sale, but I know they're not going to be happy with the workarounds." And to go back to embedded payroll, I love the idea that there are vertical SaaS platforms out there for each of those industries that can now tailor payroll specifically to them, right? So that unions aren't this painful manual back and forth. We missed this due, this wasn't taxed correctly, we have to add these. Oh, and it's been 3 weeks, so now we have to update all of the dues. If you can create a system that captures that and is aware of those changes, I think you present such a better experience for people in general.
Much more bespoke as well, isn't it? Because these verticals
Definitely.
are specific to those sectors, right? So they know the little things that come up that may be relevant for that particular industry, which makes everyone's lives much easier if you can pick and choose the right product for the right client.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's really good. Interesting. You talked again about bi-monthly, semi-monthly pay cycles.
Semi-monthly. Yeah,
I mean,
the 15th and the end of the month.
The pay on demand obviously has been widely adopted in the US, much more so than it has in the UK for sure. And yet it surprises me it's taken so long certainly in the UK, because we live in an on-demand culture now. If we want to get a movie, we stream it, it's instant. If we want to get a taxi, you go straight to your app, it's there. Everything is now. People expect things now. Our attention spans are getting shorter because it's now and now. And yet in the UK, we're kind of tied to this traditional monthly pay cycle. So the majority of employees in the UK are paid once monthly. That's it. And it's almost become a tradition, but there's a lot of fear about changing that for on-demand pay, because we're not necessarily it's basically being fearful of change and understanding how it would work. And is it going to be compliant with legislation? Is it just an additional? And there's so many different companies offering slightly different solutions that I think it's inevitably going to be adopted, because it's what employees are demanding, right? And if employees want something on demand, then we're going to have to follow suit, or they will leave and find it somewhere else. So it's going to come, but I think it's taken a little bit longer to get established here, certainly here in the UK. So it's really interesting to see how widely adopted and how positively it's been received in the US.
Yeah, I think positive for the most part. I think when it first started, there was that element of predatory lending where there was too much being charged to the employee to access their money early. And we've started to see some states try to get ahead of that and prevent that type of lending. Yeah. And we're seeing it more for that emergency situation and just that offering in general. I think utopia for me, I don't see any reason why folks can't be paid weekly. I think that's very fair for folks to, budget week to week and receive their money after a week of work. But I just think that, moving money quicker as an option is exciting in general, but, if folks are budgeting properly, and I think that benefits tend to play a big part of it. How are you breaking up those monthly totals against the payrolls that are being cut? I'm sure being paid monthly in general is probably just easier for tax deposits, right? In the United States, we deposit money based on how frequently you're paid, right? So if you are paid weekly, it's every 3 days we're depositing that tax money over a certain threshold. If it's over $100,000, it has to be deposited tomorrow because governments love their money quick. So it is interesting. I think kind of that global pay period, that makes sense to me, but I hope they shorten it for you.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to happen because employers are demanding it, right? And there's a lot more global movement as well. So people working across borders are going to demand it as well. I'd be interested to know, Jim, so given your experience across, let's be honest, so every aspect of the payroll chain, right? I would love to know what part of that payroll chain you find most exciting, because you touched upon some of the new elements now that you've seen introduced into the payroll chain, whether that's, in terms of service delivery and you talked about payroll development and the developing area. We talked a little bit about analytics and how payroll can really get involved now in the analytical side of things to improve the process. Given where payroll currently is and your involvement in the different aspects of the payroll chain that you personally sort of work with day to day, what are the bits that get you most excited? What are the parts of the payroll chain you find are most enabling for employees and businesses? And I'd love to hear sort of where you see yourself in that chain, the bits that get you out of bed in the morning and feel positive about the world of payroll, the lifeblood, as you call it.
Yeah, I think I'm an operations person by nature. So there's this part of me that just loves solving problems. I love coming up with creative solutions. I would love to eventually really spend some time on solving for corrections, amendments, tax notices, all the parts of payroll that people are really scared of. I would love to just dive in and solve that in a much more efficient manner. That really excites me for the future, because I think right now that's probably the most disparate we are as a country. Every agency accepts corrections in a different manner. Some of them don't even talk about them. W2Cs, 941Xs. There's just so much that happens in payroll and changes, and especially now with the mobile workforce, you have people being paid for months, and then they call you up and say, I've been in California for the last 5 months, and you've been taxing me in Virginia. And it's like, okay, let's dive into this. So I would love to see more efficiency there. I'd love to really dig in and find a way to give that a creative solution and some innovation, because I just don't think that there's been much thought put into that. But it's the scariest, right? People are scared. They get a tax notice in the mail. I think sometimes they don't even read it, and they're petrified, and they're not always bad, right? Sometimes they're just informational.
Sure.
Hey, we updated your rate for this quarter, but I think there's this immediate panic of, why is this agency reaching out to me? Something is wrong. And I think if you solve that, I think you create a stronger relationship with anybody that you're running payroll for. They want you to take that pain away.
How are payroll professionals perceived in the US? Certainly in the UK, post-pandemic, we've seen the profile of payroll really, really improve. We've saw, the Prime Minister in Australia publicly praised payroll professionals during the pandemic, and here in the UK, they were considered key workers, and rightly so. And we've really seen the industry improve its profile, certainly in the UK, against HR counterparts, finance counterparts. I'd just love to know, from your perspective, as someone so passionate about the subject and someone who's committed their life as a career in the world of payroll, how is payroll perceived in the US, and has that improved as technology has improved? Are you seeing that perception improve alongside technology?
Yeah, I think you're definitely seeing it improve. I don't always think it was great. I think it was one step up above administrative work.
Okay.
I think they're both incredibly important, but I think in the US it was sort of at that level. As technology has increased, I think you are seeing a higher profile. And then I think the pandemic, next to, I think because of the pandemic, there was just so many changes. People needed to be paid, understand how they were being paid. And payroll professionals, essentially overnight, they had to take their backup plan and put it in place in perpetuity. It's we don't know if we're ever going back into the office.
Yeah.
We have to make sure everybody gets paid, and I think people really understood the value there. So it's definitely increased. As technology increases, it's important, for a payroll professional who has an understanding of compliance, has an understanding of tax laws and options, is behind that software, right? Who's making sure that payroll is accurate, or that's the person that's going to be reached out to when there is an issue. What can we do here? How can we get this person paid? So I think it's growing, right? I think it's definitely, it's a growing profile. I think people are seeing more opportunity for work there. You said something on a few podcasts ago, I can't remember which episode, but you wanted to start the hashtag choose payroll.
Yeah.
I love that.
I need to start it. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, you should. As I fell into payroll, right? I wasn't a child, using crayons to write out checks to my friends. Sure. I had other dreams, and I fell into payroll, and I realized, hey, this is great. This connects every single person. It was a few months into working at a payroll company where the first person came up to me and said, hey, I just got a new job. What do I do with my W-4? I was like, oh, yeah, I can explain that to you. And then it's every year end, hey, I got my W-2, it doesn't look right. Let me talk you through that, and it's, as a payroll professional, you become an expert in this area that connects everybody. So I do hope that the profile is being raised. I feel like it is. I think there's more opportunities than ever in the space, especially if you're creative and interesting and innovating. I think hopefully we're going to see the next generation of folks maybe choose payroll, and I would love that.
I'm going to give you another analogy that I only thought about recently. I'm in training at the minute for a triathlon, and I thought, payroll's a bit like the domestique you find in cycling, right? You don't know about it. The domestique, nobody never knows who the domestique is, but it's the domestique that allows the key rider, the number one protagonist rider, to perform, because they take the win. The protagonist sits behind them the entire way, and when it counts, they've got the energy to go and perform. I like the idea of payroll, right? Because it is often overlooked, but actually it's silently working in the background to allow businesses to grow, allow businesses to perform, to allow the counterparts, the employees to perform at their best. If people aren't paid correctly, then employees aren't going to perform at their best. There's going to be these concerns at the back of their mind. It's going to hit mental health and all the different things that come with it. And yet payroll often isn't applauded for it, because actually, if you're doing your job right, people get paid and they don't think to call the payroll department and say, hey, you got my pay right again this week, this month, this day, or whatever. They go, they just, it's an expected result to have your pay be correct for the work that you've done. So you only really hear about it when it's wrong. I'm just going to take us right back to the DOS-based system example that you gave earlier. So I think it's quite nice because you're not going to get the applause that other departments might get, but the applause is silent. Like the domestique, it's if you've got silence there, if no one's calling you with complaints, it means the business is going well and it allows the business to perform. And I think you've highlighted this really well during the show, and it made me think about the domestique and cycling. I'm wondering maybe that's where payroll is in the world of business, if you were to compare the two, because you're not looking for the plaudits, you're actually not looking for the awards and all the things that come with it. That's not what payroll's about. It's about allowing the businesses and the employees to perform at their best. And it's great that payroll professionals do that without the accolades for doing so. That's not what you're after. I love the fact that you're actually chasing silence. Silence is golden in this instance for you. If you get silence, there's no complaints. That's a golden win for payroll departments. So I quite like that analogy as well, just thinking about the way you were talking. So I think you've really brought that aspect of payroll to life today on the show. Yeah,
I think that's well said, Nick. I think it's spot on. Knowing people are paid and there's no issue. I mean, there's no finer moment, for a payroll professional.
For sure. So last question before we enter the vault, which I'm excited to get into, which is, where do you see payroll moving then? The next, let's take a 5-year term on this. You're right at the heartbeat of technology. You're working for a SaaS-based company. You're seeing different developers create different elements that you can obviously pick and choose as part of the check offering. Where do you see payroll in 5 years?
I think in 5 years, I hope you're seeing enough innovation in the payroll industry to start to really convert some of the government and agencies, because we can only go so far without them keeping up with us, and their components and their connectivity is just very, very lacking. If I sent you some state websites, you'd go on them and think that they were created the minute the internet was created and then never looked at again. I would love to see that the payroll industry takes the step forward, right? I think business leads, payroll industry takes a step forward, and then I think it forces our government and our state agencies to catch up and to create better connectivity, more free flowing of information, right? We talked a few minutes ago about those tax notices. Hey, your rate was updated. Why does that have to be a paper form, right? Save the tree. Let that be an immediate data transfer to the payroll system that's connected or has authorization. There's just so many improvements that we can create, and any agency that's still taking returns on paper, it's 2022. Like, wake up. Hopefully in 2027 that's no longer a problem. I would love to see an all digital payroll ecosystem with agencies and filing. I would love to see an increase in how corrections are facilitated and a reduction in tax notices. People don't need them, as long as that money's moving quickly and accurately. I think we can avoid them. It's just a massive waste of folks' time when they get these notices, and it's like, oh, that was sent automatically. And it's like, well, why was that sent automatically? Let's get to the root of the problem. So that might be more of a utopia than anything, but I'd love in 5 years, I'd love to see our state agencies and government just catch up to the technology of businesses out there.
No, it's a great response. Now, you know what? I think that's true, not just for the US. I think there'll be a lot of global payroll professionals listening to this, hoping the same from their own governments and processes as well. Certainly here in the UK with the HMRC. So, I think it was very well put. Look, we're going to open the vault.
Entering the vault.
4 short, sharp questions for you, Jim. The first is this: one piece of advice you would give to someone working in payroll right now.
Keep your eyes open. I think opportunities are going to come fast and furious in the next few years. I think with embedded payroll, you're going to see a lot of companies either doing direct payroll for themselves, where they're going to need somebody to run that, to be accurate, to stay on top of things. And then I think companies that are those SaaS platforms that are embedding payroll, they're going to need leaders on their team, right? Because they're becoming payroll businesses, right? So I think we're going to see more payroll businesses. I think there's just going to be an absolute ton of opportunity out there for folks that are interested in implementation, tax notice resolution, taxes in general, just moving money and confirming that. Risk, if you want to tie that to payroll, I think that's also a huge opportunity. The better technology comes, the more fraudsters appear. So I think that's a huge area as well. So anybody working in payroll right now, I mean, I think that the opportunities are going to be there. Just keep your eyes open.
Couldn't agree more. Obviously, music to my ears as a payroll recruiter as well, because more opportunities mean there's going to be, it's a good thing because automation scares people. There's been a lot of studies that payroll is one of the roles that's going to be fully automated. Part of the payroll process is going to be, that's the nature of the world, but actually it's creating, this new technology is creating so many new opportunities. As we mentioned, the 60 plus roles available out there now that we've identified, there'll be more to come as well. So I think it's really exciting, and I couldn't agree more with that answer. Question 2, if you had the power of foresight and you could change the entire payroll industry with one action or one improvement, what would that action or improvement be?
Oof, that's a big question, Nick. I think I'll go back to, I would love to, in general, see a reduction of notices. I think that companies, for the most part, want to do things that are on the level. I think that there's too much bureaucracy behind these notices getting sent out. I think they're a massive waste of time. I'd love to see companies given the benefit of the doubt, that they're out there in the economy, growing the world and paying people. And tax notices, you were 5 minutes late with this deposit or whatever it is. I would love to see those largely go away, because I think they create bigger problems and waste more time than needed.
Yeah, agreed. Question 3, I'm a school leaver and I've come to you, Jim, because I've seen you're really passionate about what you do, but I'm unsure about what to do with my next step. I'm unsure what career path to take. How would you sell payroll as a career opportunity for someone who is unsure about what they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly show them your study of the 60 opportunities. I think that's amazing. I think that's one way to excite people. But I'll go back to the old, kind of the old adage. If you want to inspire people to build a boat, you make them want to, you impress them with the ocean, right? You make them want to go out to sea, and then they'll build a boat as a result. I think if I were talking to somebody about payroll, I think I would talk about, it connects all of us as people. We all need to be paid. We're always going to need to be paid. I would try to inspire them with all of the special moments and stories and existence that is, dependent on payroll, and I would try to inspire them that way.
Yeah, nice. Well, I think it takes us right back to the start of the podcast where you said it's the lifeblood, right? Without payroll, you're connecting and impacting. That's probably a better word. You're impacting every single employee that you are responsible for paying, and the way that they live their lives and what they choose to do and how they choose to spend their money, which I think is really exciting. So I think you put that really well at the start of the show. And last but not least, a bit of fun. If payroll were a song, I don't know if you're a musician or if you're into music, but let's find out. What would it be and why?
If payroll were a song, Walking on Sunshine.
There you go. There's the passion coming through. Love it. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I was hoping you were going to ask me if payroll were a movie, what movie would it be?
Well, you can answer that one too. Go on. We're here now. Go for it.
I was going to say Men in Black, because it's happening behind the scenes. There's this whole world that, folks don't know about. And anytime there's a disaster, they're there to clean it up and fix it and delete everyone's memory. And they're just, they go on with their lives.
Very nice. Yeah, I used to ask payroll a song or a movie. I took that bit out and caught you off guard. There you go. But it's a great response nonetheless. Jim Kohl, head of Payroll Operations at Check. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Payroll Podcast show today. It's been a really insightful, passionate conversation about the world of payroll. I really enjoyed the journey. So thank you ever so much for joining me today. And of course, if you are a payroll leader listening to this show and you have a payroll related vacancy that you need some support with, please do get in touch with either myself or my wonderful team at jgarecruitment.com. If you want to find out more about Check and the work that Jim's been talking about today, then I will put a link in the show notes as well, which is checkhq.com. There'll also be a link to Jim's wonderful Twitter feed, so do follow that if you're a Twitter fan, and a link to Jim Kohl's LinkedIn page there as well. Just leaves me to say a huge thank you again to Jim Kohl for joining me today. A huge thanks to all of you for tuning in and for listening. Please remember to review the show if you can, and please do share it with all of your payroll colleagues. The more people that listen to the show, the more we can raise the profile of payroll globally. So do share away if you can. And just want to look forward to bringing you the next episode real soon. Thanks again, Jim, for joining me today.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Payroll Podcast with Nick Day of JGA Recruitment. If you need help with a current payroll vacancy, then please get in touch with Nick and his team. All contact details can be found in the episode notes. In the meantime, to make sure you never miss a future episode, please subscribe to the show through any of your favorite podcast channels. Till next time.